All right, Daniel Johnson, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me on, and really looking forward to talking with you about what's going on in real estate, financial planning. A lot of fun things to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Why don't you start by talking to our audience and telling them kind of where you've been and what led you to this point and why real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually been investing in real estate going back all the way until 2007, which feels like a long time to me, but for some of your listeners, it may not be that long. But 2007, right before the Great Recession, right before the financial crisis, bought my first investment property. Was actually a senior in college, and I actually was planning for kind of a house hack before that was really even a thing, a term. But buying a house that me and a couple of roommates could live in. Did exactly that, and felt the implosion of the financial crisis, lived through it, and have continued to invest on the other side of it. So now I'm up to about 9 properties that I own, myself, and as long also with a couple of partners on a couple of properties as well. So that's been kind of the long and short of it, but really most of my portfolio is a couple long-term rentals and mostly short-term rentals, Airbnbs.
Nice. What got you into the old Airbnb craze, and how did that whole transition happen?
Yeah, so I actually started that back in about 2015, really before it was a huge, hugely hot market place. And I lived in Asheville, North Carolina at the time, and we were seeing a pretty big pickup in tourism and just people coming to town. And me and a couple of friends, we had some properties that fit the bill pretty well, and we started looking at it, started experimenting with it, and realized, hey, look, there's something to this, and we thought we could scale some. So that's who I have a couple of partners there, and we own about 6 or 7 Airbnbs in Asheville, and so really started in 2015, and have really just continued to grow it since then.
That's fantastic. So the financial planning aspect of it, and you had mentioned it before the call, and you're probably right about this. I mean, we're dozens of shows in. We really probably never had a financial planner on the show. We don't talk about the financial planning aspects necessarily of the real estate game, and so this could be an opportunity for the first time for our audience to really hear someone with that type of background, talk about planning as it relates to real estate portfolios. So let's dive into it, man. I mean, let's talk about some basics. Let's talk about some long-term wealth building strategies. I mean, what do you got for us?
Yeah. So, one thing that I want to kind of start off with is there definitely is a difference between financial planning and investment advice. Now, most of your audience probably thinks of financial planning and financial advisors and investment advisors and money managers all with the same blanket, kind of general thought. I actually hate going to events, to places, and talking to people when I tell them I'm a financial planner, because they automatically think that I work for Edward Jones or Morgan Stanley. I'm not afraid to name those companies, but those guys and gals are salespeople. They are selling products for the most part. Even if it's investment advice wrapped, most of the time it's wrapped in a financial product, and they're getting paid a commission or an ongoing trail or some type of a management fee. And that is not in what I consider financial planning. So the world that I live in and work in is what I call fee-only financial planning, where some fee-only financial planners may manage money, and that may be the main way that they produce their income. But there's a lot of us that actually don't manage money. I do manage money, but I don't get paid directly based on the money that I manage. But what it is it's more of a focus on the financial plan, the holistic nature of a person's financial condition. And that's an accounting of all of their assets, all of their liabilities, all of their income streams, all their expenses. It's really acting like a personal CFO. And what I would say to your audience is, you may or may not need a financial planner. You may be right there chugging along and know exactly where you are and where you're going. However, some folks may need a financial planner, just like a company eventually gets to the place where it needs a CFO, somebody who can manage the corporate accounts, who can give direction for kind of fiscal responsibility for the company. Some people get to the point where they're like, hey, look, there's just a lot of moving pieces here. I need somebody to focus this down. What I would say to those people is find somebody who's going to charge you a fee based on a service, not a fee based on managing assets, because in general, those fees compound and grow over time. So that's the kind of the financial planning world that I live in, is working specifically with real estate investors in helping them and kind of being their personal CFO, helping them understand where they are, how to plan for the future, and how to, allocate their resources in a really smart way.
So in a more holistic approach, not just cash in the accounts, but from their portfolio standpoint, what's the next move, 1031s, that type of thing, how to expand upon their portfolio.
Yeah.
Can you give us some stories, and maybe some real life scenarios of somebody, obviously without naming names, but somebody who recently has done some transactions, something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're exactly right. A lot of it is, tax planning is such a huge piece. Obviously the IRS provides, and the IRS and our federal government provide a lot of incentives for real estate investment. And this goes back years and years and years. Now, most of what I do really centers around the tax planning, because it's such a big piece of it. Obviously, for every dollar you don't have to send back to the government, that's another dollar you can reinvest into real estate. And then every dollar that you reinvest in real estate, it's kind of a ripple effect, because then you can then use things like cost segregation, 1031 exchanges to continually build the capital base by which you're investing and amplifying that out. Now, and then obviously, as you mature and get further down the line, you start to enter into other areas that become more and more important, like estate planning and figuring out how to transition assets to the next generation, to save in taxes in that way. And these tax planning, estate planning pieces of the puzzle start to fit together down the line. So yeah, and I've worked with a lot of real estate investors through the years, and a lot of the questions and conversations come down to what are your goals and what's your plan to get there. Some people end up just kind of accumulating a mismatched portfolio of real estate that doesn't really have a purpose and a plan in place. So a lot of times what I do when I start working with clients is I bring in all their assets and bring them into one place and start to understand their portfolio and figure out, does this belong? Is this a portfolio, or is this a property you had out in California that has, increased in value tremendously from appreciation, but it's not fitting your goal of cash flow? Maybe they're trying to retire and they say, hey, look, I got this property in California. It cash flows me, $2,000 a month, but it's worth $1 million or something like that. It's like, well, we might want to consider a reallocation of that if cash flow is more important to you. So it's bringing the whole portfolio into view and figuring out what the most efficient path towards the next step in their progress and their goal looks like.
I love it, man. I love it. So Daniel, at what level would you consider somebody needing a conversation with someone like yourself? Is it 5 units? Is it 25 units? Like when does somebody say, like, raise their hand and go, okay, I'm all over the place? And before you answer that, I want to say to you, like, I've been there, right? Like, at one point I had 3 duplexes, 10 single families, a quadplex, and apartment building. And I'm all over the place, and I have 15 LLCs, and, I'm figuring it out along the way. At some point, and by the way, I didn't even know people like you existed until I probably had 100 units, right? So at what point do you raise your hand and say, like, I need help organizing this, right? At what level would you suggest is that place for somebody?
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's going to be it depends kind of situation. There's some folks that are in the details and they can jump on bigger pockets and listen to podcasts and figure out and plan it themselves and just kind of keep rolling until they have 50, 100. And a lot of people they're never at a point where they need to outsource. And I'm one that says, look, don't hire somebody if you don't need to. However, some people get to the point where they get a little, I guess it's hard for them to understand where they are and what their next step is. And when folks start experiencing a little bit of confusion, a little bit of concern, maybe of where they stand in just the macro environment, are they over leveraged? Are they in a place where they're maybe taking too much risk? Having those second opinions can be very, very cost effective if you look at what somebody could potentially lose versus what they're going to spend on a second set of eyes and the advice behind the scenes. So I would say it kind of depends. Some people are like, hey, I've gotten to 5 units, but I want to propel myself forward, and I'm not exactly sure what the best path to take is for that. And maybe it's not an ongoing long-term relationship. Maybe it's a one-time engagement where they get kind of financial advice plus some coaching to kind of like gear them up and say, okay, I know what the next step in my path is. Some people may be at like 25 units and they say, hey, you know what? I'm ready to start kind of consolidating. I'm ready to start working towards retirement to where I can start going a little bit more hands off. Maybe start selling off some units, 1031ing into some syndications and some more passive vehicles to where they're not as hands on. And maybe that transition, if they have a good CPA, a lot of times a good CPA can help them with that. But a lot of times CPAs are a little bit backwards looking, not forwards looking. So that's where bringing in a financial professional that can help with that transition and help them, move from one place to the other. That's usually when I see a lot of people coming, is when they're big life events, when they're thinking about transitions, when they're either tapping the brakes or hitting the gas, is usually what I see.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So what do you see as, maybe the top 1 or 2 obstacles that your clients find are in their way or don't even know about until they have conversations with you, right? They just realize like, oh, wow, I never thought about that before, they sat down and talked to you, and then you help alleviate those issues for them.
Yeah. One thing that I see so much is a client's, they're looking at their situation and they're maybe wanting to figure out how to get to the next level. And they're not realizing that, and it kind of goes back to my comment before, they're not realizing that they maybe have a bunch of cash or a bunch of equity tied up in a property that if they were to either find some sort of liquidity from that they can then just propel themselves to the next level. That is one of the most common things that I see. And a lot of people have properties that they are literally losing money on, and they're just sitting on it because they don't know what to do next. And it's just one of those things that, and a deeper analysis of the portfolio, digging into the tax return to really look at, how much money you're making on an individual property by property basis, can clarify so much. And obviously, once again, CPAs can do that, but a lot of times it's not in the job description for what the CPA is doing. So that's one of the biggest things that I see. A lot of times it's also surrounding just, the fear of allocating assets and the fear of taking the leap. And it comes back a little bit more to some just more like kind of life planning exercises where you're talking with them about, what's kind of the worst case scenario for the next 3 years if you make XYZ decision. And if you did this and the market drops 30%, what's the worst case scenario? And spell it out. We just saw a pandemic. And I don't think anyone was underwriting that in any of the deals that they were doing in 2019. And so we've lived through probably the worst case scenario for a lot of folks, but now there's always going to be new fear on the horizon. So it's a little bit of those breaking through, just the mental blocks that investors can develop over time. Even when you have success, when you've done a great job, you still have to get through these mental barriers to get to the next level, to find the next great deal, or to have the confidence to invest in the next thing. So those are the kind of the pieces of the puzzle that I try to put together and help people feel more comfortable with their situation.
I love it, man. I love it. I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have those roadblocks. They need someone to coach them through it. They need someone to help them see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's it's impactful. So Daniel, I ask everybody these things, and there's a reason why you had to fight through some steps to get to where you are and then where you've become successful. What are some of the big roadblocks? What are some of the big obstacles that you've had to overcome to get to this point in your life?
Yeah, so obviously kind of referred to it and referenced in the very beginning, bought my first property in 2007. I subsequently saw the value. I mean, it was a new build,
Mm,
again, a new build in 2007. And I saw the community, the neighborhood, the prices literally get chopped in half,
mm.
and was just sitting there kind of thinking like, what if something happened tomorrow? What am I going to do? What if I lost my job, et cetera, et cetera? Continued to just write the check for the mortgage, bring in income. That was tough, and honestly, that set me back. And I wish I had been in a different position then to invest differently, because that was obviously such an amazing time to be purchasing property. So I kind of had a break in my investing experience between 2007 and 2013. Pretty much took about 5 years off, just to recalibrate, figure out where I stood. I was working in finance, and that was obviously an upheaval as well, working in the banking world. And then, so that was kind of one big thing that it was a little bit of a setback. It wasn't a huge obstacle. It was just kind of biding my time and figuring out a better entry point for myself. The second one was actually not too long ago. Me and a couple of partners, we bought a fourplex right in 2019. Intention was Airbnb, short-term rental. So we did a big renovation on it. We're getting out of the renovation piece of it, about to refinance, literally have the term sheets on the table to refinance. And then all of a sudden, lender starts going quiet. And then we reach out, oh, our interest rates have gone up, from about 4.5% to 6.5%. We're like, okay, so we're still moving forward to closing. Quiet again for another week. Hey, our interest rates have gone up to 8.5%. And then 2 days later, no financing, we can't refinance these. So we're under a hard money loan, and we're having to, kind of pivot, figure it out. And obviously the same time this pandemic's coming, Airbnb is our target. Airbnb becomes, the worst place you want to be. Nobody's traveling. So we pivot into nurse housing for a little while, kind of push through this, cash flow the units, pay the hard money loan for another 6 months. Finally, we're coming out and we've refinanced those properties, and we're back off to the races. So, that was kind of just a very, very recent roadblock that me and my partners, we just had to fight through, and we just watched these cancellations come through on Airbnb, day after day after day, cancellation after cancellation. So it was really hard to see. It was really hard to experience, but I'm really glad that I went through it, because, honestly, I've got a better understanding of how I need to kind of protect myself, how to plan for these really huge unknowns that the market and the world can bring you. So,
Man, I got to tell you, I've been saying this for the entire time during COVID, but like that adversity is really what defines true entrepreneurs, right? Your ability to course correct and execute anyway, right? If the number one thing is taking action, for our listeners, taking action to be able to create something for yourself. The number two thing is course correction, right? I see so many people take action and then they hit a roadblock, and what do? They shut down, right? And it's just forget about it. I can't do it. It's not worth it. I tried, I failed. I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before. But when you can course correct and you can do what you did, that overcoming adversity is really what defines true entrepreneurship, right? They say, I don't know what's the 55% of first time businesses fail in the first 3 years, or some statistic like that. And
yeah,
I really believe it's from lack of course correction. It's somebody is hard
right.
set on, this is what I do, and it's the only thing I do. And then they're hit with one roadblock, and it's like, shit, shut it all down. We're done.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so I applaud you for that.
yeah. I mean, pivoting is a critical part of business, period. I mean, how many real estate investors are doing the exact same thing they did in the very beginning? I would say very, very few.
Very
Most
few.
most folks, you're learning, and as you learn more and more, you have a better understanding about a better path to go on, and obviously getting mentors and getting folks ahead of you that are already experiencing those things, that have already gone through that and can give you words of advice. but there's really nothing like experiencing it. I mean, if we're completely honest, because you can get people talking to you and coaching you and doing this sort of thing, but until you experience one of these hardships, a setback, you're just not going to know and understand what it means to pivot, to make changes in your business, to put yourself on another path forward. I mean, you see it in technology, you see it in our technology world where I mean, Airbnb started as an air mattress on the floor of somebody's bedroom, and it has now become obviously basically a replacement for a hotel. Nobody thought that was going to be the case. They continue to pivot. Entrepreneurs in that space continue to pivot, and this is kind of what's come of it. So, and who knows what it's going to look like in the future. So you can't stop, either. You can't just quit innovating and changing the way you think about things just because, hey, look, I've done really well on a couple of properties. You have to keep on rethinking the way you're doing it. So.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. So Daniel, you have 3 little boys under the age of 10, right? What are you
Yep.
teaching those young men today to instill and impart in them, this entrepreneurial spirit, this level of success that you want them to achieve? How do you get them on the right track?
Yeah. I mean, it's wild. So they're 9, 7, and 5. It feels like what the main thing we're trying to do right now is just to keep them from, beating each other up every day. But one of the main things that I'm trying to just really instill in them is, hey, look, hard work. I mean, they see me and my wife hustling around all the time. They see us out there, doing things that, I would imagine that their friends, like, that it's strange, right? Like you're real estate investors, you're going and buying properties all the time. And they tell their friends about it and they're kind of like, what? So kind of thinking differently, hustling, looking at the world in a different way. Those are all things, thinking creatively, really, at the end of the day, those are all those things that I want them. And I'm trying to teach them to see, to say, look, just because, everyone else does it this way over here doesn't mean that's the way that you need to do it. You can take a different path. Maybe it's, studying something completely different than what, the world tells you need to, study. Maybe you don't have to study engineering if you don't want to become an engineer. Maybe you can go and maybe not even go to college. So that's, we're trying to really just teach them, think creatively, work hard, whether it be in their schooling right now, work as hard as you can. But then also have fun, get out and play, get out and do fun things, do things that you enjoy, lean into that stuff. Because a lot of times when you're doing those things, those are places that you can find additional opportunities in. So that's, those are the main things that we're really trying to lean into and teach them.
Yeah, I think it's all sage advice. Very good stuff. So I like to ask all our guests, what's the big goal you want to accomplish before you die? We're all here for a finite amount of time, right? And you wrote that you want to take 50 families, you want to impact them in a huge way, and you want to teach them how to create that place of uncertainty. You want to turn them into a place of certainty in retirement and have them retire with confidence, right? How do we do that? What's that look like? How do you reach those people? What's the impact look like? How far along are you, and how can we help?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I mean, I think I used to work for a large financial planning firm, and I had about 100 clients. So I would say, hopefully, I've already done a good chunk of that for those folks. I would say a little bit more specifically, my goal is really to not have this monster financial planning business to where I don't have these personal relationships with the folks that I work with. My goal is to have a very small boutique niche that the people that I work with really become family. And so that's, I left my last firm basically at the beginning of this year, all on good terms, but I didn't take any clients with me. And so that's kind of one of those things that's building a business from the ground up, just the way that I envision it. And one of those is just keeping a view on helping other folks, not just building the business, if that makes sense. Like helping these families, bridge that gap from where they may be struggling with whatever the issue is, whether, it's the thinking of how to get to the next level, how to transition away from active real estate investment, or somewhere in the middle. And really just, the goal is to kind of work with 50 families over the rest of my career, and to really help them to get from where they are now into retirement, and to make some massive impactful things in their life that affects them and their family and generations beyond them. So that's really what that looks like for me.
Awesome, brother. So, you added so much value today, Daniel. What did I forget to ask you? What did we not cover that you wanted to cover? Did we miss anything?
I think you're doing a great job with the podcast. I really enjoy listening in and listening to all the different perspectives. The only thing that I can really, I'm a big advocate. I've been in the financial planning world for about 8 years now. And the biggest thing that I can advocate is looking for someone who understands what you're doing, and not just settling for an advisor, an investment advisor, financial planner, financial advisor, whatever you want to call it. Really finding somebody who understands what you're doing, is going to charge you a fair fee based on what it is, and then is going to be there with you on planning advice specific to your needs and your situation, not just managing a portfolio of investments over here. Asset management is very important. We know that. Obviously, anytime you hire, invest with a syndicator, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to adequately manage the assets and do a really great job. So asset management is a very important thing that goes back a long time. But really, from my perspective, being a fiduciary means making sure that the client is able to move in the direction that they want to move in, and that there's not advice that's contrary to what the investor, the client is wanting to do. So that was my goal with building my firm, Refocus Financial Planning, is just is having that I'm sitting on the same side of the table with my clients, that I'm a real estate investor. I want to work with other real estate investors to help them continue to invest in real estate, not to pull their assets out of real estate and to go into some financial products over here.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Finding a perfect fit and finding a good fit with someone who's aligned with your goals. Absolutely. So that being said, how do people reach you? How do they find you? And how do they find out if you're a good fit for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I offer 30-minute intro calls with anyone and everyone that wants to touch base. And it's one of those things that I really do believe that if I'm not the right fit, then I will find somebody else that will be the right fit for someone. I've got a great network of other financial planners out there. So the best way to find me is refocusfp.com. So the refocus is real estate focus, fp.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me in a lot of different places, but refocusfp.com is the best place to find me.
Perfect. And we'll also make sure we put the links in the show notes so people can reach you directly. Daniel Johnson, I appreciate you being on the show today, brother. It was a great show, great information, and I'm sure that the audience is going to get a ton out of it.
Thanks, Joe. It was a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.